thank you to the team of CAN International for the hosting of this webinar. I will be giving an overview of the situation of carbon bombs. First of all, what carbon bombs are, and then how they are distributed around the world, and how we could go about diffusing them before we will hear from the colleagues on the ground who are actually doing that, working on diffusing carbon bombs. So the research that we did on identifying carbon bombs started with a very simple question, which surprisingly until 2 or 3 years ago, nobody had answered. And this question is, what are the biggest fossil fuel projects in the world? And I guess I don't need to talk much about the context, but just to remind us that we are in a situation where we are already seeing very grave impacts of global heating around the world that has been called out as a climate emergency. And the international consensus at the climate negotiations is to try and not heat more than 1.5 degrees in order to stop short of initiating that domino effect of runaway climate change that would take us into a hothouse Earth. But we are already in a situation where these dominoes are starting falling. So basically, if we do nothing, meaning we don't burn any more fossil fuels, we would still get to the hothouse Earth. So we need to actively cool down the planet. And stopping the burning of fossil fuels is just the first step on the way to being able to cool down the planet. And that means diffusing the carbon bombs is the most urgent task on that pathway to guaranteeing climate stability on our home planet. And every little bit of fossil fuels being burned makes it hotter. So here we're just looking at the most important pieces that need to be stopped. Who says so? Who are we? I direct the Leave It in the Ground initiative. We're a Germany-based NGO. I'm myself based in Mexico. We have a team in the Middle East and many colleagues on a global level. We work on accelerating that exit from fossil fuel burning. And we do so by identifying the carbon bombs. We have set up a global bottom-up climate action matrix called fossil-free zones. And we also explore pathways for oil companies such as the Mexican national oil company Pemex to be able to move beyond fossil fuels, beyond oil. So these are some glimpses into the work that we are doing. And in this case, I'll be talking about the carbon bombs. Now, what are carbon bombs? For us, under our definition, these are fossil fuel extraction projects, coal mines, oil and gas fields that could, over the course of their lifetime, emit 1 gigaton of CO2 emissions. That is our definition. We invite, colleagues who are working on big fossil fuel projects that are not on our list to call these carbon bombs as well if they think they deserve that name. In any case, I have a link here if you would like to identify how much CO2 might be emitted from the fossil fuel projects that you are fighting against. You can do that with the King metrics, the Keep It in the Ground metrics, and you will just need the commonly used figures on, pipeline capacity or trillion cubic feet of gas in the ground or million tons of coal and things like that, or gigawatts of a coal power plant to translate this into CO2 figures with that link. Now back to the carbon bombs, 1 gigaton, that's 1 billion tons of CO2. Germany has about, I think, 600 million tons. So that's more than Germany, the whole country, emits in 1 year, in one coal mine, in one oil and gas field. To identify these projects, the biggest projects in the world, we needed to get some help, and luckily we had the Global Energy Monitor, Urgewald, Global Witness, Patagonia, and Catch a Fire helping, contributing resources and sharing data to be able to complete this task. And the resulting analysis we published in a peer-reviewed journal called Energy Policy that came out in July last year. And the results of the search were that we found over 400 projects of that size all over the world. About half of these projects are oil and gas projects, and the other half are coal mines. And what was interesting was that 40% were new projects that hadn't even started yet. And that is something that makes me hopeful to be able to stop these from happening. In the midst of a climate emergency, we shouldn't be digging the hole deeper. So there is a chance to intervene. And on the right-hand side, you can see the comparison of the fossil fuels in these carbon bombs in comparison to the 1.5 degrees carbon budget from the IPCC, which is from 2017. So that means in the 5 years since then, that has dwindled a lot. So it is very clear that these carbon bombs don't fit into any 1.5 degrees carbon budget. And here we have another visual representation of what that looks like. On the left-hand side, you can see the emissions since the beginning of the fossil fuel age, which are these gray balls. And then this white shaded area here, that would be a 1.5 degrees carbon budget. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the size of the carbon bombs. So it is very clear that these cannot go forward. These cannot extract all the oil, gas, and coal in them. So something needs to be done about it. The Guardian covered our research on the front page with a burning piece of paper on the corner. And this pointed many colleagues who are campaigning, but also many journalists to this research. And this has turned into quite a significant work stream with many people digging deeper into the picture and trying to understand the carbon bombs and trying to find ways to contribute to diffusing them. So this is the three-step process that we think about at LINGO for diffusing carbon bombs. The first is to identify where they are, and this is largely done. The second is to understand these projects very well, to identify their weak spots, to know where to intervene. And then once we have those weak spots, we can diffuse them. Now, in terms of identifying, the first thing is to know where they are in the world. And this is a map from our article where you can see the distribution over the world. And you can see that there is a huge accumulation in China and another huge accumulation in North America and another big cluster in the Middle East. And today we will be talking about the carbon bombs in Africa, which are not as many as other continents, but still quite a significant amount on a global level, as we will see. So here is the list of African carbon bombs. You see Algeria, Botswana, Libya, Mozambique. We will be hearing from Ilham from Mozambique today, Nigeria, which Ken will be talking about, South Africa. We have a colleague talking, and then Tanzania and Zimbabwe. I'll leave the link for the full list, for the full global list, and some summary statistics about the African carbon bombs. 22 projects, 16 of them new. So this is a new frontier. Most of these projects are have not started yet, and it's half coal and half oil and gas. And the total is almost 44 gigatons CO2. So In terms of understanding where these projects sit, there are different ways to look at them. We already flagged the new projects in the list, and it is quite clear that there should be no new fossil fuel projects in the face of a climate emergency, and even the International Energy Agency says so. So that is part of the challenge, to make sure that no new projects are started. The second thing is that existing projects should not expand, so they should not have in additional capital expended on them, so they can be put into harvest mode. This means that you don't build any new infrastructure. From the existing oil or gas wells, you keep the oil and gas flowing, but you don't build anything new. And this harvest mode could be an intermediate between increasing and shutting down immediately, which can provide the oil and gas that we will still be using in the transition phase to 100% renewable society. And the third approach, or the third perspective on carbon bombs, is that of early closure. And that means that even though the power plant or the coal mine might still be, might still have reserves, and there is a way to continue going with it without investing new capital, but we still shut it down early because of the negative impacts. And I think that especially for coal, that is something very reasonable to think about, how to shut down early these pieces of coal infrastructure. Now, looking at these projects, something that makes me hopeful comes up, and that is that because they are so big, these projects move really, really slowly. So for a carbon bomb size project that takes billions in investments, it takes several years to prepare, to get the finance together, to get government approvals, environmental impact studies, and so on. And once all of that has been done, it takes decades to extract all the oil and gas or coal from these projects. So that means that these projects are moving very slowly, and we can use that time wisely to find points of intervention and for stopping them. Now, another angle on these projects that is not being used so much by companies and by governments when they plan or allow these projects, and that is looking at the death and damage caused via climate change from these emissions. And there are peer-reviewed studies out there published in Nature that have quantified the social cost of carbon and the mortality cost of carbon. And I'm just seeing question. And this translates for a project of this size to over 200,000 deaths related to climate impacts, and to 418 billion, that's $500 billion of damages just from the CO2 going into the atmosphere and contributing to further climate-related impacts. And these numbers should be put on the table when taking decisions within companies, but also within governments, to give the green light to projects like this. A piece of research that we have done, and that leads to another strategy, is on the supply chains, because these projects are very huge and lots of actors are involved. From the moment that you do exploration, financing, insuring them, machinery, the companies operating them, then transporting it, processing it, and selling it, and finally burning it. It's a very long supply chain with many, many actors involved, which means that there are also many points for intervention. And in the case of Russian carbon bombs, we have looked just as at the finance picture, and we have found many, actually hundreds of Western financial institutions that were still supporting with money these Russian carbon bonds. So just making that public has led to many of them questioning that role and trying to find ways to get out of it. So that's some work that can be done to understand them better with view to diffusing them as well. Now turning to how to diffuse them, there's litigation that can be made in many places, sometimes nationally, sometimes internationally, about companies being involved, and there are further strategies. Let's see. Another one is to reframe. For example, the fossil gas industry has been talking about natural gas for a long time and has brainwashed many people into believing that fossil gas were a bridge fuel, were climate friendly. But that's comparing it to coal, the worst of all. And actually, it's also distorting the way you account for the climate impacts, because fossil gas is methane and it develops its climate impacts in the near term. So after 7 years, half of the methane is already washed out of the atmosphere again. And this means that the impacts from methane are happening very close in time. And if you avoid methane emissions this year, you're saving lives the next year. And this really suggests that fossil gas would be a good candidate for doing something effective about the climate emergency, where if we phase it out in an emergency fashion, we would be able to even bring down temperatures globally. And I think that is what is needed. We need to cool the planet. So reframing how we speak about fossil gas and methane could be a way to help preparing the diffusing of the gas carbon bombs. And one thing that is missing is a serious conversation of governments about fossil fuels and climate change. And I've put some of the faces here of people that are suggesting themselves as climate champions and doing something constructive about the situation. If they would host a conversation, a serious conversation about fossil fuels and climate change, about diffusing carbon bombs, that would really be something useful in the situation. But so far we haven't seen that yet. We haven't heard that yet. So in the meantime, climate champions are those who actually work to diffuse these carbon bombs, to stop that coal, oil, and gas coming out of the ground. And we will be hearing from several of them now from the African continent. I'm very excited to be sharing this session with them. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing those experiences, and also to interact with all our guests to chart the way forward for diffusing carbon bombs. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Janet's had a problem with connection, so she's asked me to do the introductions for the panelists, if that's okay. I'm just jumping on board last minute, so please have some patience with me. So the first panelist that we have is Samuel from Environmental Government Institute in Uganda, Stop ECOP. He's an environmental scientist who's currently working as the director of the Environment Governance Institute. And this organization focuses on promoting environmental conservation and advocacy for a just and inclusive energy transition in Uganda. And yeah, so do you want to take it away, Samuel? Sorry.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm very glad to be here and bringing the stories from Uganda, and especially in regards to the Stop ECOP. And I go with my presentation.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I will just go ahead and share my presentation with you. Okay, like Kjell had just said, climate bombs, and the planet needs to be cooled, and we need to cool down the planet, and that means our actions must be rhyming towards cooling down the planet. But is that what is happening in Africa, in our countries? I will have a quick discussion in regards to the ECOP, the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, which is running from Uganda, Tanzania, and how it is a climate bomb. My name is Samuel Okulony, and I work with the Environment Governance Institute. So for just a quick introduction about AGI, we're an environmental organization, and we work towards promoting the sustainable management of the environment and natural resources. And we work with different categories of people, including youth, communities, local leaders, and mainly working towards promoting equity and social justice in the natural resources management and support a fair transition to clean energy. And in a nutshell, in regards to just the context of what's happening in Uganda, we have about 3-4 high key projects which are ongoing. And one is the Tilenga oil project, which is developed by Total. And this is happening within and next to Marshall Falls National Park, with about 35 well pads and 420 wells, and having expected to produce about 190,000 barrels of oil per day. And the second upstream project is the Kingfisher, which is led by CNOOC. And this is just within the basin of Lake Albert, with about 31 wells and 4 well pads, but expected to produce about 40,000 barrels of oil per day. And all this oil, part of it will be taken to the ECOP, which will be transporting the crude out from Uganda to the Tanga port in Tanzania and exported into the outside countries. The ECOP it covers about 1,445 kilometers distance. It's a 24-inch diameter pipeline. It's going to be heated at 50 degrees Celsius because of the wax nature of Uganda's oil, and expects to produce to transport about 246,000 barrels of oil per day. And just to give a quick detail about the East African crude oil pipeline, like I earlier said, 1,445 kilometers heated pipeline running from the western part of Uganda going up to Tanga port, and 24-inch electrically heated. It will have 6 pumping stations, 2 in Uganda and 27 in Tanzania, because the majority of the pipeline will be covered in Tanzanian part, but the key hotspot area is in Uganda, because that's where the oil is produced. But also one of the key contentious issues in regard to the pipeline is about the 460 kilometers of the pipeline, which will be passing within the Lake Victoria Basin, which supports about 40 million people within the region. And of course, if we let the ECOP to be constructed, it will be the world's longest electrically heated pipeline, and that is a disaster. And when we talk about climate bombs, we don't have another planet, we only have one, and we need to protect it. However, transporting 246 barrels of oil per day and in a period of about 25 years will manage to generate about 379 million tons of carbon emissions per year in the life of the project. And this is according to Climate Accountability Institute study. We are already hitting at about 1.1 degrees, and we need to stop and reverse the climate emergency. And we don't want to be adding in more carbon, especially for us in Africa, whereby we have less capacity to adapt to climate change. And when you look at the emissions alone, these have exceeded the total emissions that France generates, about 277 million tons of carbon in 2020, and almost next to the ones that are produced by the entire Australian continent. And of course, ECOP will definitely worsen the severity of climate emergency if we let it to be constructed. And just to give you details of how do we come out with the 379 million tons of carbon emissions that will be generated from the life of the project. Taking still again from the Climate Accountability Institute statistics of 2020, the study was undertaken, and you find that in the upstream operations, it has not yet been included, but during the construction phase of the pipeline, we expect to generate about 0.24 metric tons of carbon, which constitutes about 0.06% of the entire carbon that will be generated from the pipeline. And of course, this was partly estimated by ECOP itself and subject to further scrutiny. But also, you find that during the operation of the pipeline, we expect about 6.55 metric tons of carbon, and this constitutes to about 1.7. Still, this is coming from the ECOP, their own estimates of the ECOP. Then the marine time, now when the oil has reached the Tanga port and it's going to be transported to other countries through the marine transportation phase, we expect it to generate about 6.67% of 6.6 metric tons of carbon, and this estimate is about 1.7. The refining phase of the oil that will be generated that will be coming out from Uganda, and when it's refined, it generates about 35 metric tons of carbon. But the biggest concern here is now on the product use. After all this has been used, it has to be used somewhere. And how much carbon will it be generating? About 330.7 metric tons of carbon, constituting about 87.2%. We wouldn't want to be adding this into already a stressed climate that we need to be contributing towards reducing or mitigating climate change, especially in Africa, where we do not have enough capacity to adapt to climate change. We should be contributing the solution and asking others to join us. But ECOP alone is not just a climate bomb, but also it affects quite a number of the social and environmental aspects related to the project. 13,000 project-affected households will be impacted in Uganda, Tanzania. Already 86,000 people are impacted on their land, they're dispossessed of their land, and economically about 3,000 people are also affected. You find that the people that will be displaced from your land, you're not going to continue doing business with the other person because they've been relocated, so you lose business capacity itself. But also, as conservationists, we know that about 200 square kilometers of protected wildlife habitat will be impacted, and this impacts the critical biodiversity, especially of the chimpanzees and elephants. And we need to be contributing, and these are the sectors that contribute a lot of income to our countries, especially through tourism. In 2023, we shouldn't be building a massive pipeline that will be traversing and adding into the climate emergency. It doesn't make any sense. We should be working towards bringing all efforts together to see that we're able to bring combined efforts to mitigate climate change. But if companies do not listen to science, that it's time to stop investing in fossil fuels, then let's approach their banks. Let's make our demands clear. Stop financing or insuring ECOP, because it's a climate bomb and doesn't work for the people, doesn't work for, but makes just profit for the few individuals and for the companies to benefit. We cannot afford to add fuel to already a burning house. And we cannot use an excuse that because Europe or other countries just need to develop. So if a neighbor is burning his house, then you also burn your own because he is burning his, doesn't make any sense. And we need to be contributing. That's why I say together, let's stop East African crude oil pipeline for the people, for nature, and for climate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samuel. Also, I forgot to introduce myself in that brief bit before. My name is Dara. I'm one of the communications officers for CAN International. And next we have Joseph Kenson Sakala, and he's with our Leave It in the Ground partners who are organizing this webinar. But yeah, if you want to give more of an introduction about yourself, that would be great.
Great. So just want to share my screen. Okay. So I don't know if you're able to see my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So briefly, my name is Joseph Kenson Sakala. I'm calling from, I'm speaking from Malawi, and I work with LINGO, and also I'm the executive coordinator for YSD Malawi, which is an environmental organization. Currently, we are mainly working with communities in different rural areas, but also mainly those communities along the lake. Yeah, so I'm here because we are also running a campaign just to complement to the efforts of other previous presenters. We have a campaign on Keep It in the Ground for Peace, as you can see in that picture. And this is aimed at stopping the potential oil drilling on the lake, which is in the exploration phase, and soon it will migrate into the extraction phase. So we are doing everything possible together with the grassroots communities across the rural communities to work together in trying to build awareness and also dialogue between the communities and the government. So briefly, that's what I'm going to talk about in the next 2 minutes. I have a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Sciences and also Masters in Project Management. And besides YSD, I'm also working with different other environmental networks and organizations across Africa, but also Europe. And Malawi, as you can see in that picture, it's in the southern part of Africa, and we are neighboring to Tanzania. That's why I'm proud to have also a colleague in the panel that we can push this together. So as you can see in that map, Malawi, a large part of it, it's made of, it's surrounded with a lake on the side of Tanzania and Mozambique. And this oil project is covering the whole lake. So there are 4 blocks on that lake, stretching from Kalonga down to Monkey Bay, like you can see on that picture. So what is happening, we are working with communities along this lake, the lake from the north going south. And what we've managed to do so far, it's to establish a community of people that have established a network to resist and to work together to ensure that the lives of people, the welfare of people, but also the rights of nature are prioritized over the profit making of these companies. So it's like you can see in that picture, Lake Malawi, it's one of the lake that houses the highest number of fish species. Research has it that we have more than 1,000 different fish species. You can see in this picture, these are just some of the fish that you can find in the lake. And there's findings that there are even more other fish species that haven't yet been discovered in the lake. So we are doing a number of community engagements with support from LINGO. As you can see in this picture, these are some of the engagements that have been having with different people. And you can see one of the people that are highly affected, it's also the education sector, the people in the rural communities, because of climate change as a result of these selfish fossil fuel investments. And for this reason, that's why we are mobilizing people and also coordinating, connecting with different people from different parts of the world, because now we have realized that this fight, one country cannot win on their own, but rather we need to come together and to push together forward so that we have a collective agenda and that we have a collective strategy as we confront this fight. And just to give you an example, I was so touched with the latest development in Malawi, just for your information, for some of you that might not be aware that has been mostly hit with the climate, the cyclone. And one of the areas that have been affected heavily, it's the education sector, the schools. And right here where I am today, I'm working with some school students that are still struggling, the schools still struggling to deal with the aftermath of the cyclone. And there's a lot of schools that have been closed and even schools turned into like camps where these people are finding refuge. And with me is just one of the school representatives with whom I know I don't have so much time, but I still just wanted to bring his voice into this discussion because he's one of the directly affected persons education sector. And I thought just to hear what they're doing. So they are really doing so many things. I think maybe you might wish to just say something briefly, like what your school is doing, and also what you plan to move forward.
Okay. Actually, I'm teacher Jairus Charuga, teaching at the certain school somewhere lower west. Yeah. So here we have tried to come up with some alternatives so that we should try to deal with this challenge of cyclone Fred. Actually, our school has been hit with this cyclone Fred. The kids, the learners are not able to attend the class just because their parents are not able to find their needs, as well as the school resource and the like. So far, as a school, we have tried to come up with some alternatives so that we try to deal with these challenges. Like you have managed to come up with the this system of trying to plant trees so that maybe we should try to stand with this kind of climate change. Apart from that, we have also tried to come up with this issue of telling individuals not to do this cultural practice so that we should be in track of this kind of climate change. Actually, this issue of cyber trade has also tried to mess up with our Sunday trainers who are failing to attend some evening classes as well as night classes. So as a school, as concerned teacher who is also teaching Stand 8, we try to come up with alternative to produce or to have some kinds of light, of which it's not trying to work, but if at all there might be a minimum of $1,000, at least we can try to come up with some kind of solars so that the kids should be able to attend the classes during night hours and the like.
Yeah, so thanks so much. So briefly, that's what I wanted. I thought like maybe it's not enough just to talk from my scientific perspective, but also I had this opportunity to get someone from the grassroots. But however, these efforts are not addressing the climate justice. The big question in the House is how do we come together to confront the climate justice? Because much as they are planting trees, much as they're trying to bring solar in the classroom, but the biggest thing is not what they're doing here, but the biggest thing is to stop what is causing climate change. So I'm just appealing to all of you, and I'm looking forward to an open discussion that we can be very open and very realistic in confronting the real challenge in front of us. Besides that, we're also planning to, because one of the companies that are investing in Malawi, they're from the United Arab Emirates, and we have some build-up campaigns towards the coming COP so that we can also present the case of Malawi, that they should not leave Malawi clean, and we don't want their dirty in this country. And this is one of the messages that we want to pass across to the upcoming COP presidency, besides the renewable energy conference that we are organizing in Malawi, but also some advocacy and capacity building trainings that we are doing with these communities that are on the verge of being exploited by these lake oil drilling companies. So that's what I can say for now. Because of time, let me stop there so that I can also give the other speakers time. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, although I took more time than allocated. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Joseph, for those powerful words at the end. Now I'm just going to hand over to Yegeshni Moodley from Groundwork South Africa, who is one of the senior managers for Climate and Energy Justice campaign. So yeah, do you want to introduce yourself a bit further?
Thanks, Dara. So I run the Climate and Energy Justice campaign at Groundwork, and we are an NGO based in South Africa, expanding into Southern African footprint and also working within the Africa region. We specifically work with community-based organizations, allowing them to access the spaces in governance within the bureaucratic space, empowering them with knowledge and skills, and also the vehicles to be able to reach into that space and make meaningful contributions. In terms of the carbon bomb approach, within the slides that Kjell has presented, you will see that there are 7 projects that have been identified in South Africa, 1 that is existing, but 6 further coal mines that are proposed within South Africa. And another one that I'd like to mention, which is not listed, is the Messina Mercado Special Economic Zone, which is an additional SEZ type development, which we are currently opposing through litigation, which also has the potential to meet the carbon bomb criteria. I'd also like to highlight oil and gas exploration in South Africa, which is also being experienced in the broader African context as well, where we have currently opposing 25,000 megawatts of gas infrastructure projects within South Africa, which is actually more than 50% of our current energy generation capacity existing in South Africa. These include onshore and offshore projects, and we have also prepared litigation as a response to each of these projects, as well as working effectively to mobilize communities for their voices to be heard within these projects. We currently are active in the Life After Coal campaign, which is a joint campaign that we work together with EarthLife Africa and the Center for Environmental Rights, which is our legal partner. And the aim of this collective is to discourage the development of fossil fuel projects, to reduce emissions from existing coal infrastructure and encourage a coal phase out and enable a just transition from fossil fuels. A further win within this Life After Coal campaign is that in 2016, our environmental minister for the first time required a climate change impact assessment for a coal power plant in South Africa. And since then, we've been using that as a landmark judgment, opposing other fossil fuel infrastructure projects in South Africa. In terms of the just transition, we've put together a document called the Open Agenda under the Life After Coal campaign. And that includes demands such as sustainable energy, the end of financing for fossil fuel developments, the rehabilitation of ecosystems that have been damaged to coal mining and coal fires, health system, transport and communication, food sovereignty, service delivery, a new economic system, gender justice, youth, and also open democracy. And we are working on projects to further the dissemination of the open agenda and start to actualize that and activate that within our communities and within our campaigning. We also have the Cancel Coal court case, which is a constitutional challenge that we are currently preparing in South Africa. And this is to oppose 1,500 megawatts of coal-fired electricity generation. And we're working collectively to bring this action with the African Climate Alliance, the Vakani Environmental Justice Movement. And what we're arguing in that court case is that government's plans to develop new coal-fired power plants not only threaten the rights of us to have an environment which is not harmful to our health and well-being, but also impacts the rights of future generations in South Africa, the right to life, dignity, and equality, and also the best interests of our children. And that is something that is currently underway, and it's being posted in social media through the hashtag #CancelCoal. In terms of the just transition, we're also working effectively in the areas where coal-fired power plants have currently been shut down or in the process of being decommissioned. And this includes an extensive area in the Mpumalanga Highveld in South Africa. And what we're asking for in these areas is similar to the demands around the open agenda, where we're looking for a new energy system based on socially owned renewables. So we are actually advocating for just transition centers, which is not a term that we've coined as yet. We're looking to slightly remove it from the Just Energy Transition Partnership, which is currently underway in South Africa. So we are looking to base centers within these areas that will be dramatically affected, because we're not only looking at employees within these power plants, we're looking at a significant secondary economy that develops around servicing these power plants and the communities that work within the power plants. So looking at creating new jobs in renewables, but also large-scale restoration of these ecosystems that have been so severely damaged by generations of coal-fired power production in South Africa. We're also looking at things like healthier and climate-wise housing. Traditionally, we've had employment townships created close to these power plants, where communities have been housed in very poor quality housing, which is not thermally efficient. So we're looking at how can we improve that. And one of the processes that we're using is an energy democracy project, where we are now piloting within 3 communities in South Africa installation of solar units, demonstration units, but also allowing them to have conversations around their choices for energy. One of the other additional work around that is also the basic income grant that we are proposing. I think that is all that I wanted to cover, and I hope that I have managed to keep within my time. I was racing through quite a lot of that information, but just to highlight that we are actively working around coal in South Africa, but also the forthcoming threat of oil and gas exploration, which also threatens South Africa's climate future. Thanks, Dara.
No problem, thank you. And that was really interesting about the energy democracy projects. I found that quite interesting. But now to Ken Henshaw from With People Nigeria, who is an environment and climate justice campaigner from Nigeria's Niger Delta. So if you want to take it away, Ken.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Let's just confirm I'm audible. Excellent. Thank you so much. So my name is Ken Henshaw. I work for a non-governmental organization called We the People, and it is based in the Niger Delta of Nigeria. I'm pretty sure you have all heard about the Niger Delta. It is that place in the Atlantic coast where oil has been extracted from non-stop for the last 65 years with devastating environmental consequences. Nigeria has got two natural gas. Nigeria has got two natural gas based projects. One is located on the Atlantic coast in a place called Bonny, and another in the Atlantic coast also in a place called Brass. And there are two major pipelines to convey natural gas planned from the Niger Delta. One is from the Niger Delta city of Warri in Delta State that will run right through up to Algeria, about 4,000 plus kilometers of gas, pipeline straight to Algeria. And the idea is that this gas pipeline will feed most of Europe's gas needs. And the other one is the West African gas pipeline, which runs from Nigeria through Ghana, Togo, Benin Republic. And now it's also being planned to move gas up to Morocco and perhaps also to Europe. So the idea is that massive gas projects are being planned in Nigeria, taking off from my Niger Delta and heading all the way to Europe. And these gas projects are having devastating environmental consequences, especially for the people who live in the area where these activities have been implemented. In several instances, gas projects have been implemented right in people's farmlands where they have farmed on for centuries, right in people's backyards, in their rivers and streams where they depend on for their livelihoods, and causing widespread pollution and widespread poverty. Now, Nigeria as a country has made tremendous resources from the extraction of crude oil. At some point, Nigeria was the 6th largest exporter of crude oil, exporting anything between 2.6 million barrels to 3 million barrels. Right now, Nigeria's crude oil volume is not so dramatic anymore. It has declined significantly. But this extraction has basically fueled most of Nigeria's income. Nigeria makes about 90% of its government income from the extraction and sale of crude oil and gas. But despite this fact, the country is still one of the poorest in the world. In terms of health indicator, Nigeria has some of the poorest. It's about 54 years. So, life expectancy in Nigeria is 54 years, and it's one of the lowest in the world. It's even worse in the Niger Delta where I live, where life expectancy is 46 on account of the impact of oil and gas extraction on the people. And like I said earlier, oil and gas projects have basically destroyed the livelihoods of the people. You may have read about the UNEP report on Ogoniland that said that the people have been so terribly poisoned by hydrocarbons, including a cancer-causing chemical called benzene, which is in the water people drink 900 times above safe levels. It will be interesting to note that most people in the Niger Delta still drink from that type of benzene-contaminated, cancer-causing poisonous water up till today. And health indicators have been terrible. I've already talked about life expectancy. We have got cases in the Niger Delta where for women, sometimes in the Niger Delta, we have reports of women going into menopause at the age of 25, at the age of 30, men becoming basically impotent, children being born with different diseases of the respiratory system and all that. And these have been scientifically documented, and they have been linked to hydrocarbon extraction in the Niger Delta by multinational oil companies. The impacts of extraction, ironically, the Niger Delta produces the bulk of these resources, but we are at the front line of the impacts of climate change when it comes. We are suffering on the northern end massive desertification, and on the southern end massive floods. Every year we have annual floods that rise up to about 2 meters, inundating people's farms, destroying homes and so on. And as a result of the poverty the people have faced, as a result of the impacts of climate change, as a result of the pollution caused by oil extraction, there has been massive resistance in the last 3 decades to oil extraction. We know about the Okulony experience, right, where Kenson led a mass of people and basically not only said leave the oil in the ground, but for the first time, an indigenous people actually stopped oil extraction in their domains up till now. From 1990s up to today, no single drop of oil has been taken away from Okulony land. And that's an example that everybody is following right now. Our campaign in the Niger Delta against this massive extraction carbon emitting project is you have to leave the oil in the ground. We're currently demanding a moratorium on all further extraction in the Niger Delta region. But we are also faced with the fact that new coal finds are being explored in the Niger Delta region. I'll speak more about it if there is more time. I've been notified that it's time to stop speaking, so I think I'll end on this note. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Kem. And now we're going to hand over to Ilham Rawoot. Sorry for my typo in the chat, but they are with Justiça, Friends of the Earth Mozambique, and I'll let you do a bit more of an introduction.
Thanks. Yes, hi. So I work for Justiça Ambiental. Oh, and thank you all for your Kjell and your team for the amazing work you've done on the carbon bombs. I think it's really, something that's going to benefit and strengthen the struggle for climate justice. So I work for Friends of the Earth Mozambique, and we're an organization, a climate justice organization that is based in Mozambique, and we work with communities on the ground in different parts who are being affected by extractive companies. And my focus is the gas in Mozambique. So currently there's Sasol has these has projects in Inhambane, onshore projects that it's had since 2000. But my focus right now is the international work of the Say No to Gas campaign. And this is focusing on Cabo Delgado, which is in northern Mozambique. And I'm sorry, just to let you know, I might get cut off because I'm in South Africa and we have a very inept and corrupt power utility that runs on coal and gas, but still is rife with mismanagement and the power might go off. But fingers crossed that doesn't happen. The gas in Cabo Delgado has been a complete mess before it's even started. And there are currently 3 projects. The Coral Liquid Natural Gas project, which already started exporting. But there are 2 that are, there's one called Mozambique LNG, which is one of the new projects that makes up the 11 gigatons of carbon in the carbon bombs report. And 3 of these come from Mozambique Liquid Natural Gas project. But right now, this project is on hold because there was where, fossil fuel companies go, conflict follows. And Total has been running this project. All the giants that you can imagine are there: Total, Eni, Exxon, BP, HSBC, governments of many countries are financing this project. And the industry is worth $50 billion. But there's been mass militarization because of the gas industry in the area, and almost 1 million people have been forcibly displaced. 4,000 Mozambicans have been killed, and the area has become highly militarized. But after a massive attack that happened in the town of Palma, which is in the gas region, Total paused its project. So it's still busy with the construction onshore for what will be an offshore project. So now we're at a point where we can still stop this project before Total actually goes back to the construction. And the way that we're doing this is, because the campaign is so international. All the companies involved are in other countries. What we do is we work very closely with communities who are being affected. We have a focal point who lives in the communities. We, a staff member, we have, we work really closely with certain members of communities, and we get, and we're really one of the only organizations in Cabo Delgado that has access to information about what really is happening to people and how they're being impacted by the industry. And my colleagues, put themselves at risk all the time, their lives on the line, and people speaking out, saying anything about how they're affected by the industry, losing their homes, their lands, their livelihoods. They're very scared to speak out. So people really are very brave to get these issues out into public. And what we do is, with this information from the ground, we take that so my role is to take that to the international level. So our partners around the world are so for example, we work closely with organization in France, Friends of the Earth France, because Total is based there, and 3 of the French banks are based there who are involved. We work with Friends of the Earth UK because the UK government is putting in $1 billion. The South African government's putting in $1 billion. So we approach this from a few different ways. One of the things is how we confront companies. So we go to shareholder meetings, we'll have meetings with them, which are not sitting down and, having a chat. It's like quite hostile. It's about us getting information, also letting you know that, we're not going away. Then we write letters to relay formal complaints. Friends of the Earth UK has been part of a court case against the UK government for the last 2 years because of their financing of Mozambique gas. And then in other levels, we also have actions, more sort of disruptive actions at shareholder events, and we write reports, we create knowledge, and basically the idea is that people in other parts of the world who are actually, whose governments are benefiting from the taxes from these companies who are ruining Mozambique, these activists and civil society have this responsibility and the access to be able to fight in their own countries. So if you want to know some more, you can, because I have to get off, you can go to the stopmozgas.org website, and you can see how you can also get involved. I'm going to put it in the chat so you can visit if you'd like. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to talk, and congratulations, everybody. Well done on all the work that you're doing. And we're in lots of solidarity with you.
Thank you very much for that, Ilham. And then our final speaker today is Kwami, and they are from the Center for Environmental Justice, Togo. Do you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Dara. Thank you, everyone, the previous speakers. Kjell, thank you for the opportunity. Yes, I work for Center for Environmental Justice, Togo. We are mobilizing communities against oil extraction and gas extraction. As you may know, we have oil has been discovered in 2012 in Togo, where we have 2 blocks, Kara blocks and OT blocks. And communities are already being impacted, especially with the climate crisis, the climate effect. So we have coastal erosion that are very huge in terms of impact. It's key impacts of climate change on communities, where communities are being displaced because their houses are being destroyed because of the sea advancement. And we also have the impact of West African gas pipeline I think Henshaw has talked about it. We also have a portion passing through Togo where we have fisher folks impacted because a huge restriction area is being imposed by the owner of the facilities, where fisher folks cannot go near to the pipeline to fish, or you know that fish need where it's cooler, so they are around the pipeline. So those are the impact we have, even though Togo is not yet an oil producer, but we facing already the climate crisis. So that's why we are mobilizing communities to say no to fossil fuel extraction, to say no to gas extraction. And we believe that combating the drivers of fossil expansion is key. So that's why we, in our campaign, we focus more on so-called solutions to climate that are forced solutions. And as Kjell explained in his introduction, it's clear that we have been trapped in the fossil fuel cycle, and most of the impacts of it are on the global south, especially in Africa. And as other speakers also said, Africa is more impacted by climate change. So if we allow fossil fuels, especially oil and gas, to continue to be burnt, then we will not be never free from climate crisis. So that's why we need to continue fighting. So the thing is that our leaders are corrupt. So while campaigning to cut down drastically the CO2 emission and move away from fossil fuels, African leaders are still believing in offsetting and other fossil solutions, which indeed give power to financiers, multinationals, and polluters to continue looking for new fossil fuel projects, which means the pollution will continue from fossil fuel industry expansion. From the presentation from Henshaw, he talked about the expansion of West African gas pipeline. We believe that the offsetting, the leaders think that they have a way to sequestrate the carbon. They have a way to remove the carbon. So that's why they are moving toward those kind of expansions. So they have more fossil fuel industries. So to recall, a new African carbon market initiative was launched at the COP27. Those who were in COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, they will remember that this initiative was launched in November 8th. That initiative actually is a distraction from the real solution to climate change. And what was very destructive is that, is that 13 members of African leaders, they are member of the steering committee of that initiative. We also have some carbon credit experts who believe that the initiative will support the growth of carbon credit production, will create jobs and protect biodiversity in Africa. That's unbelievable, because all those things are false solutions. Actually, they are false solutions. So they also claim that by 2015, it will be 1.5 billion credits to be targeted in Africa, And we got $120 billion US, and will support over 110 million jobs. All those declarations are lie. So they just want to keep expanding fossil fuels by promoting those for solutions, by promoting offsetting, by promoting plantations, by promoting geoengineering, by pushing those food solutions into Africa. Unfortunately, we have Kenya, Malawi, Gabon, Nigeria, and Togo. They have shared their commitment to collaborating with that initiative, the offsetting initiative, to scale up carbon credit production in Africa. So it seems that African leaders are determined not to learn from their mistakes of the past for a fictional initiative that keeps Africa locked in the fossil fuel trap, to be conceived as at a time that Africa is on the grip of climate crisis is totally inconceivable and unacceptable. So we cannot accept that. We need to move away from fossil fuel. So other fossil solutions are being pushed into Africa, as I said, carbon capture through monoculture tree plantations. If you go to Mozambique, you have Kjell that promoting huge monoculture tree plantations. So the idea is to produce energy and link to biomass and also link to removal projects. So all those narratives are false. So the narrative behind those false solutions are simply false. So they said, usually said, we find ways to remove carbon from atmosphere. We find ways to manage those carbon to let continue emitting huge amount of CO2. So those narratives keep giving power to multinationals to continue expanding fossil fuel. So in this regard, we call our African leaders to reject the financialization of nature. We demand that big polluters and the global north stop fossil burning and pay for loss and damage. All those climate effects in peoples in Africa need to be paid. These four solutions initiatives are a disincentive to progress in cutting down on emission. Carbon trade, carbon dioxide removal, plantations, and geoengineering are simply business at the expense of the planet. Unfortunately, the fossil fuel industries backed by the global north government have found willing partners in the global south leaders, especially in African leaders who have shockingly decided to close their eyes, their ears to the cries of the people carrying the biggest burdens of the climate crisis. So no to fossil fuel expansion, no to fossil fuel industry expansion, yes to people's power. So by this, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kwami, for that. And I just want to say another thank you to everybody who spoke today, all our panelists. Does anyone have any questions just to wrap up?
If there are no questions from the participants, I have a question for our speakers. And this is to the issue of diffusing these carbon bombs. I know from colleagues in different countries how tricky it is sometimes to oppose these projects which are portrayed as being in the national interest and so on. And I think several have mentioned this as well. So in terms of intervention points, what in your experience from fighting against these projects would you point to as the most effective intervention points that we can use to stop these projects, be they on the national level or on the international level with international partners. Are there any intervention points that you really like, that you would like to point to, and that you would say, if we do more on these, we may be able to stop more of these projects? And this goes to all of our panelists.
Yeah. Okay.
If I may. Go ahead, Samuel.
Okay, thanks. I can go first. Yeah, in regards to the campaign on the Stop ECOP, I know in at national level or at local level, opposing it is highly risky, especially for the local activists. But how we manage to do it is basically working in coalitions and ensuring that they can't single or target you alone, so that you have both the local actors and linking local to international, the campaign. That helps, especially in regards to the operational space, but also ensuring that we are able to challenge the narrative. Also, we try to invest more into research so that we have evidence-based advocacy, especially in regards to the global south, to challenge the narrative that we need these fossil fuels for development. So we invest more into research and ensure that we use the research for evidence-based advocacy, but also to target the key decision makers, especially at local level. You know that at Parliament has quite a mandate, engage the media has influence on those that hold the power, and we try to make sure that we have great allies in these sectors to ensure that we protect ourselves, but also have a good, successful campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. And then Ken, did you have something to say as well on this?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. So I'm going to highlight two strategies. The first, which has worked significantly in the Niger Delta, is the fact that we have discovered that litigation, using litigations to hold these companies accountable, frustrates their efforts to implement this massive, carbon emitting projects. Right? In Nigeria, we are currently working with communities, and we are suing most of the multinational oil companies for environmental degradation. In fact, the entire Niger Delta is a web of litigations all around them, and that's why they are fleeing the region currently. There's a new wave of divestments happening in the Niger Delta, where oil companies are hurriedly selling off their assets and they are running away. And we know this is because we have found a way to get environmental justice in international courts, and they are running away. And so litigation works. The second thing that also I think is a strategy we have used very efficiently and effectively is to mobilize local resilience, right? Mobilizing people at the grassroots to demand accountability, to demand an end to forced extraction. And one way we do this is by convincing the people through advocacy that 65 years of oil extraction has actually meant nothing, has not improved the life or the welfare of the people, and it makes more sense to leave the oil in the ground. And so the more we convince people that oil and gas left in the ground represents a better prospect for development for them, the more they become, their resilience increases, the more they join the campaign, and the more frustrating it is for the government and oil companies to implement these massive, giant bomb projects.
Thank you for that. Litigation. Did anyone else want to input on this question, or does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, just to add one or two strategies. I think it's very important to look at litigation as well, because there is mitigation, but litigation also is very important. I want to throw here the example of Nigeria, where communities, Bodo or Goi communities, sue the company, and they have results. So I think it's a good strategy to combat those polluters and also to combat climate crisis. The second strategy here is to bring community voices to international. I think Ken has said it, but we need to put more emphasis on that to let international community hear the local voices, the impact that they are facing. So it's very important so that they know that what they are causing is hugely affecting people at the Global South. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Kwami. And then Yegeshni.
Thanks, Dara. I think what the other participants have mentioned is really valuable. What we've also tried to do in addition to this is also push the idea of the just transition. So looking at what are the alternatives to coal-fired power generation? How can we improve our access to energy and conserve the environment that we live in without people being affected by respiratory diseases, without polluting our water courses, and show people through demonstration units and through empowering them with jobs in sectors that are not harmful to the environment and to the communities in which they are based, that there is a cleaner production, not to use an industry term, but a cleaner way of living and of being in the environment, pushing also the objectives around a new economic system that goes beyond the colonial understanding of the way we develop and we grow as nations and as communities. And an additional objective that we also are working on developing further is the idea of exchanges. So allowing communities to be in solidarity with each other, whether they are still going through the struggle or they are learning from each other as they have, as the struggle is still impending in their areas, so that they can actually embrace each other, even within the difficulties that they face currently. And, if possible, also learn and define new strategies and ways of being through that interaction. Thanks.
Thank you, Yegeshni. And then just finally to wrap up, I'm going to hand back to Kjell.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for sharing these insights into the, some of the most powerful strategies that have been working. And I think this is also something that the international governments should be looking at, to say, there are people on the ground who are affected, who are fighting back, and there are things that have been working very well, and the end result will be that we will be able to diffuse these carbon bombs instead of getting locked into the fossil fuel model. So I hope that putting this out there will help to more people, turning their heads and paying attention to the important work that all of you are already doing, and supporting it more so that we can, win these fights and keep our homes safe and keep our, our people safe and our children with a bright future. And I think it takes working together, and it takes a lot of solidarity and connections and listening to each other. And I'm glad that you all joined us today, and that we were able to get at least some very brief spotlights from different places and listen to each other. So thanks for joining today, and we will be continuing this series. We will make the recording available. The previous sessions on Europe and Latin America are already recorded, and we will be having the next session next week on North America, and others are coming up on Australia, the Middle East, Asia, Russia, and Central Asia. So we will continue the conversation on how to defuse carbon bombs, and thanks everybody for joining us, and